As blockchain regulations evolve worldwide, how can Australia learn from leading markets? This is Crypto Corner. I'm Caroline Bowler. Welcome to the programme. Today we explore global trends in digital assets and the industries thriving with blockchain adoption. Joining me now to discuss is Steve Vallas, Managing Director, and Richelle Cox, COO of Blockchain APAC. Hello, gentlemen and ladies. How are you both doing?
Very well.
Thank you so much for coming on and having a chat with us. Now, we have just had a very successful Blockchain APAC Policy Week in Sydney just last week. One of the things that was really, I think, value-adding for Australia were the amount of international guests that came over, and it spanned jurisdictions worldwide. Richelle, would you like to talk to us about how the event went and what went into it, and how on earth did you manage to get such quality people to come over to us here in Australia?
Of course. We committed to this in December of last year, and we had the commitments early from around, I would say, 40 to 50 international guests. Then as we progressed throughout the last few months, we had interest garner, and the number we got up to was about 70 international attendees from all different jurisdictions all over the world: the UAE, the UK, US, Europe, and just the focus we wanted to have was to have an international lens come to Australia and sort of discuss what was happening in their different jurisdictions and how Australians can essentially take away what is happening overseas and what we can implement here.
What did you think then was the draw for that international talent to come across? And actually, even if you just want to give some examples of the people that came here.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of convincing. Not really. Not a lot of people tend to come to Australia just to come to Australia. We had to convince a lot of them that it was a beneficial business case, that different businesses haven't spent money in the jurisdiction that's gone to waste. We just wanted to get them all out here to sort of see that Australia is a country worth investing in and to set up business here as well. So that was the main drive to get them all out here.
And who was it that you had over, for example, from the United States? Who came? Because that's particularly far to travel.
Well, the United States, we had a lot of different Fireblocks representatives. We had Jason Alagrante come out. He's their Chief Legal Officer. We had Amanda Wick. She's the CEO of the Association for Women in Cryptocurrency. Oh my gosh, off the top of my head. Joe Schifano from Aventus. He had come out. And we also had the UK. We had Perry Scott from Kraken.
So we're talking here about, I suppose, senior figures, both who are within the blockchain industry worldwide, people who look after a lot of exchanges and so forth.
We had a lot of senior policy people globally from all different global businesses as well. So it was just a who's who of attendees, and I think it was really beneficial to, throughout Policy Week and the RegTech Forum that we held on Tuesday, to only have international voices throughout the course of the day, which, from what we heard, all the Australians said that it was refreshing to hear that was the case, which was really exciting.
And I think, Steve, as well, just with that, it wasn't just internationals. Obviously, there was local voices that were in the room, particularly from the major political parties. Do you want to talk us through, A, how you managed to get politicians to come, and also what the general message was from both of those guys leading into a potential election coming up?
The timing was important from our perspective, and what we tried to do was tailor the pitch to the group that we were talking to. Richelle mentioned the internationals. The internationals are interested to know what's happening in the Australian jurisdiction. They're invested in the jurisdiction and would like to invest more. So that was a pretty broad-ranging kind of pitch. Locally, from a political perspective, there's a sense that this is subject matter that people should be across. And it was easier to engender interest this time than it was, say, a year or two away. Nothing sharpens a focus like an election. And then sitting between those two groups are the regulators. The regulators have to implement this. So political will is one thing, industry participation is another. The challenge is for regulators to very quickly have a sense of what's happening across jurisdictions beyond their own borders. And that was one of the things we think delivered the most value to the group generally, is we're able to bring a variety of people, many of whom have businesses that are global, with Australia as part of it, as opposed to sort of a localised view. So the regulators showed up in force, Caroline. I think we had almost 50 regulators across 6 departments, all show up to the meetings and to the rooms that mattered to them, and that was one of the credits to Richelle's construction, is lots of these rooms were bespoke creation. There was no ticket, there was no room everyone had to be in. We tailored the rooms to the subject matter and the expertise.
Do you feel, I mean, both of you have been around this space for a very long time in blockchain terms, in crypto terms. Do you feel that there has been a shift in Australia? Do you feel there's still a shift to come? Particularly when you look at the conversations that were being held from our international peers. Do you feel that there's been a shift, and do you feel that perhaps with our regulators, do you feel it with our politicians, do you feel it within our economy, our businesses? What's been your take?
Well, I think we're at the precipice of change, whether it's good, bad or indifferent. I think from what we were able to see last week, there has been a slight shift in perspective when it comes to the subject matter as well, especially within the regulators and within the political landscape as well.
I think it's fair to say we're too insular. More often than not, geography makes us insular, and this subject matter, the sort of tendency is to look at it and say, how does this impact us? And the position we tried to bring to rooms last week was, how does it influence all of our decision making rather than how does it influence Australian decision making? And that was something we think we sort of moved the needle a little bit on last week. We found with the regulators, as an example, they met one-on-one with a lot of people who aren't from here, and I think that's one of the challenges. Voices like your own, we show up, we say things consistently. Sometimes the variety of the message, even when it's the same message, is important. And so we just gave regulators across the country the opportunity to ask different people what they thought about what the implications of this technology are.
And certainly I think, as somebody who's an industry participant, we've seen engagement from ASICs in particular on this topic and the regulation that's to be moved. And credit to ASIC, they certainly have been showing up more visibly in these rooms in recent times. But that brings us on quite nicely to discussing 225, their most recent consultation paper, which has just closed. I know, Steve, that you've read a broad swathe of different submissions that were put forward. What's been your take generally on the mood and impression from Australians and others who've contributed to 225? I
think from the ASIC perspective, a lot of credit's necessarily given to them because it's the most comprehensive consultation I've ever been a party to, and my understanding is it's probably the most wide-ranging consultation they've ever performed. The sorts of things that industry normally complains about, a short period of time, not much notice, it was the opposite. We had 3 months to give consideration to all these issues. Unfortunately, it is like an onion. That extra time, all it's ultimately done is it's raised more and more questions, which is a positive thing. It sort of now has created an environment where people recognise there's just a lot to get through. And the issues that are the most important are largely ones that make us competitive or uncompetitive. Businesses in the space are saying, we are well and truly happy to comply with regulation. We expect to be licensed. The question is, what's the cost of that? What's the implementation timeline? What's the confidence with which we can make business decisions? What does this mean for our business? And so I think that conversation had never really been given a proper opportunity to be ventilated. And I think the last 3 months has said, we're not talking about not meeting regulatory obligations. We're just saying if it's uneconomic to do so, asking any business to invest years and a lot of money to not run a profitable business doesn't make any commercial sense. And I think that message has been heard more loudly by ASIC and a variety of other regulators in recent months. And just, can you share this, and what's the time frame now post 225? Obviously they're now taking on board all the submissions, they're digesting what they've received. When do we expect a response, or what is going to be the likely response from ASIC on this? So there's lots of complexity in the moving parts here, and one of the challenges for industry and for regulators is they're focused on their part of it. So if you zoom out for a second, what you'll see is a lot of consultation responses have gone to ASIC. There's a lot for them to digest, and the consultation closed a matter of a few days ago, and so that means they'll be looking at this across March and April, where they would likely tend to form a view. We're going to have an election, and so you've got the challenge, which is that timing complicates any final decision. So that's happening again against the backdrop of Treasury themselves also looking at reforms and licensing with respect to this space. Again, it was likely without an election in the way that something would have come out in the next month or two. Now the question of how likely it is to come out before the election versus post, we don't know, and so we'll wait and see. So you've got Treasury acting, and you've got regulators broadly being drawn in to that, including APRA as a regulator, AUSTRAC as a regulator, the ACCC as regulators, all of them are now working on pretty material changes and reforms that impact the digital asset and the crypto sector. So if it was a relationship, I think fairly characterised as complicated.
We're not in a situationship anymore. It's moved on. It's definitely progressed. And I think with that too, like the scale of the complexity around this is not to be underestimated. And it's also, you know, you take heart from looking at what we can see overseas. This is a fundamental shift in the structure of financial markets potentially, and very much that would be of my view. And when you look internationally at where everyone else has progressed, like this is now a matter of time for Australia, so it is important that we get it right. And if it takes a couple of extra months, then so be it, because this is going to be foundational, I think, for the economy, and it's going to impact everybody and touch on everyone's lives. You did mention about the election, which is going to be saturating our airways over the coming weeks. What do we expect in terms of impact if we get the existing government returned, if we get a minority government, if we get coalition? What do we expect in terms of impact on our sector?
I think importantly for the industry in a really positive sort of sense, blue team, red team doesn't matter quite as much as it once did. There's been uplift on both sides of politics with respect to this subject matter, in large part driven by what you can't ignore, which is what's happening in the US. I mean, the attention in the US and the way the political landscape was shaped at the tail end by crypto conversation and digital assets conversation, that's too hard to ignore. But on the other side of the world, and this is one of the things we think is really usefully sort of informing the local conversation, regulators in the UK, the implementation of regulatory reform in the UK and Europe, Singapore and the Asian region generally moving faster, all of those things are informing, I think, in a really useful way, what we should and could be doing here. The question for us now is, we don't take any longer than we have to. And that's been historically the challenge. The criticisms, I think, over an extended period of time have been how long it's taken. We really don't need to wait. We've got enough information and we have enough, I think, use cases and enough variety of experience in the way other jurisdictions have rolled this out to say, this is our position and let's roll forward. So hopefully we can play a little bit of catch up.
Yeah, fantastic. And just with that, you've spent a lot of time all over the world. And Richelle, I know in particular, like the amount of time you spent in the United States. What do you think that we can learn from the US down here in Australia as we look to just specifically around this space and how things have evolved? Because a lot of this has been cultural impact as much as it's been anything else.
I think from their political landscape that with their election that's just happened, we can sort of learn that maybe the regulation by enforcement isn't necessarily the right way to go. It'd be interesting to sort of see how Australia does move in that regard as well. I know that has sort of been the focus recently. ASIC have had a lot of court cases that have gone through, and they're just testing the waters essentially with how that goes. But with the Trump administration and how they're essentially like moving forward with not necessarily a Wild West sort of perspective, but it's sort of kind of reined in a way that may influence the way we move forward as well.
I think importantly, it's a very good reflection of the fact that things can change quickly.
Yes.
And one of the things that's causing issues potentially that we can very quickly and need to address is things have turned, what's our position when things have changed? And I think that's the opportunity going into an election. It's a clean break. Whatever happens, whether it's blue team, red team or some team in between, we've got an opportunity to reshape that, leave behind in the previous term what we thought was great and also what we thought we didn't do well, and then look forward to the next 3 years and see whether we can get some great outcomes.
Brilliant. And on that happy and optimistic note, we shall wrap it up. Thank you so very much for coming on and joining us.
Pleasure.
So this program has been brought to you by BTC Markets. This is Ticker. We'll be right back.
You're watching Ticker. We'll have more in just a few minutes.